Welcome to Developing America's Next Generation of Leaders. This is an introduction to the White House Fellows Program. And you are hosted today by the White House Fellows Foundation and Association. And our co-host is the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And before we get started, I would like to invite Marco Davis to please say a few words. Marco.
Thank you so much, Margarita. Good afternoon, everyone. Marco Davis from Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, CHCI. I'm just pleased as could be to be able to partner and to help share information about this opportunity with folks in our network. The White House Fellows Program is it's an incredible opportunity for a variety of reasons, and I won't go into many of them. I think that'll be the bulk of the conversation here. But the one thing I think worth mentioning is so many folks in the CHCI community are interested in making positive change in their community, and they want to do so at scale. They look to do so at the higher levels, and that's one of the reasons, systemic levels, and that's why the reasons they often go into public policy and work on Capitol Hill through our programs. Well, the White House Fellows Program is a perfect complement to that, may even be a follow-on to folks who've done the fellowship or the internship program through us, and even certainly for folks who haven't, because it really gives you just tremendous insight on the one hand into the workings of government from the executive branch, right? And obviously at the nerve center truly of the ways in which the direction of the country is being steered through working with folks, but also throughout the federal agencies by interacting with that on the one hand. And on the other hand, it's a very similar, and in fact, I would argue even more prestigious, if I may say so myself, network of people that you connect with, both within the Latino community, as you'll meet some of our illustrious folks here, but also beyond the Latino community of folks who, again, share that same commitment to making change in the nation and to leveraging all of their talent and expertise and bringing together all of the resources and the talent and insights of their peers towards making the nation better. And so I think plugging into a program like this just really helps someone for years and years and years forward in terms of their own career, their own growth and personal development, but also again, in terms of being able to have impact and make change in the nation. So again, I couldn't be happier to help support and participate in this webinar, as well as to encourage all of our alumni, our program participants, friends and relatives of our programs to know more about this program and to consider applying, because that's one of the things is that we need to up the numbers of folks from our community applying. And this is really, it's the kind of thing that we, I think, don't take advantage of as much as we should. We should be far better represented among the White House Fellows and the incredible community that's there. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Margarita and her colleagues here with the White House Fellows Foundation to share more.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. So you should know that several of us posted to social media, as did you. So we actually may have a much wider audience beyond CHCI, but we really appreciate you being the catalyst for getting this webinar done today. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we're going to have these little pop-ups that come up during the webinar because we want to know more about you. So if you don't mind taking a moment and please answer the pop-ups that you see on your screen. Okay, so my name is Margarita Colmenares, and I am the Director of Outreach and Recruitment for the White House Fellows Foundation and Association, which is the alumni group for the White House Fellows. And in 1991, I was living in Los Angeles. I was working in the private sector, but at the same time, I also, I was an executive on loan to a national STEM nonprofit, and I was the national president. So you might say I was wearing two hats in a way, because I had my private sector career that I had been working for about 10 years or so. And I was also leading this nonprofit group on a leave of absence. So I was assigned, even though I have an engineering/technical background, I was assigned to the US Department of Education. And I worked for Deputy Secretary David Kearns, who had just retired from Xerox Corporation. And because I was from the private sector and he was from the private sector, it was a good match for my particular year. In any case, we are just really pleased to have you here today. And next slide, please. And I am so pleased to be joined by the stellar cast of my fellow colleagues and alumni. Let me just briefly, if you look at the years, you'll see that they represent different class years, and also they're joining us from different locations. I'm on the West Coast in Sacramento, California. And we have David Iglesias, who will be telling you a little bit more about himself, Nelson Diaz, Carlos del Toro, and Erica Gonzalez. And you will learn more about them as the program proceeds. Next slide. So the White House Fellowship has been written about and is considered by many, the way it's been described by others, is the nation's premier and nonpartisan leadership and service opportunity. And I need to emphasize the nonpartisanship part of it, and because here's why. Over the past 55 years, more than 800 White House Fellows have served over 10 consecutive presidential administrations. And what that means is that Democrats and independents serve under a Republican president, and Democrats and independents, the other way around, Republicans and independents serve under Democrat presidents. So it truly is one of the few programs in DC that is a nonpartisan program. Next slide. When the White House Fellows was first envisioned, the idea was to bring folks in, quote, from the outside into the highest levels of government. The purpose being so that we could foster and strengthen these future leaders so that they could better understand how government works at those levels for the betterment of our communities and our nation. The idea was to come in and learn and to take that information with you back to your communities or whatever your chosen career path was going to be. We also have in the audience, and for this reason, we are hosting these webinars because we want to encourage people from all walks of life, from all regions, to consider this incomparable opportunity. And so our mission today is to encourage you, the audience, to please take a close look at the program. If it's a good fit for you, please apply. We also have in the audience folks who are in the position to identify other candidates who can also apply. So we thank you for being in the audience to help us spread the word. Let me give you a quick overview of today's agenda. First, we're going to give you an introduction to the White House Fellows Program, including a short video that will show you the different administrations and how fellows have participated in that. We're going to point out to you the online resources that are available 24/7 for you to reference. Then the highlight of today's program will be the panel featuring our alumni and their reflections on what it meant to them to be a White House Fellow. At the end, we will have time for a Q&A. However, during the session, there's a chat box. Please feel free to post your questions there because if we don't get to all the questions by the end of the hour, we will go into a little bit of overtime to try to get to all the questions. Otherwise, we will email you back. Okay, so now I think we're ready for to roll the film. Thank you.
What we're trying to do is to find here in this country, yes, here in the White House Fellow, a combination of an idealist with vision and a pragmatist with judgment.
This program goes back for 55 years and stretches across all departments of government and presidencies and administrations. And it's an incredible program, and I hope everyone listening will encourage others to apply, to learn more about this. It's something that everyone should know about, even though they may not be a fellow themselves. It's a rich part of the White House tradition, and we're very grateful to President Johnson and those around him for establishing this program.
Founded in 1964, this prestigious program puts the best and brightest physicians, military officers, academics, business leaders, and others to work in the highest levels of government. With direct access to the White House, cabinet secretaries, and world leaders. Many of its alumni have gone on to greater achievement. Colin Powell, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, Senator Sam Brownback, Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal, to name just a few.
I learned most of all how you champion good causes and how you stand up and fight causes that are not good. how you take risks for doing that which is right. And so for me, it was a very formative experience, one that I've treasured ever since.
Year after year, I've enjoyed working with the White House Fellows. Each and every one brings a variety of talents and energy into the government, and in many ways represents my best hopes for our future.
What kind of person do I think should apply for the program? I think would be someone who is committed to servant leadership, just as John Gardner would have said, someone who is ready to give back.
We expect a lot out of you. We expect you to go back to your units or your businesses or your universities or perhaps government agencies and lead, to set high standards, to set a good example, and to serve something greater than yourself. That's what the Fellows Program is all about.
I had this amazing fellowship year. I worked for the First Lady, Hillary Clinton at the time. I think what was interesting is in the beginning of the fellowship, you're sort of trying to find your way and you do everything. And then all of a sudden, by the midpoint of the year, someone comes up to you one day and says, "We have a speech for the First Lady tomorrow. Do you want to write it?" It's just these sudden baptisms throughout the year that are wonderful. You feel like you're absolutely not prepared. You can't do it in some ways, and then all of a sudden, you're doing it. And when a year goes by, you can't believe it's over. I think in many ways, the year as a White House Fellow has shaped the rest of my life.
Thank you. So what is a White House Fellow? A lot of this information that I'm going to cover right now rather quickly is on our website, and I will tell you more about the website in a minute. But fellows in general, here are some of the selection criteria. They have a demonstrated record of remarkable professional achievement, as well as evidence of leadership skills and potential for future growth. They have a demonstrated commitment to public service in their communities, with the groups that they work with, etc. And they have the skills to succeed at the highest levels of government, because as a White House Fellow, you are assigned as a special assistant to either a cabinet member or another senior official in the government, and you must be a U.S. citizen. Next slide. So as we go along, we will explain more about this, but the President's Commission on White House Fellowships and the Commission Director are the ones that oversee the program. We are the alumni group, your host today, and we support the efforts of the Commission. The makeup of the class in any given year can be anywhere from 11 to 19 fellows. It's not a set number. And as I said before, fellows typically are assigned to a cabinet agency or the White House, or one of the departments. So it just really, you don't know until you actually become a fellow and you go through something called placement week. So the time frame for being a fellow is September through the end of August. And we get asked a lot, is the fellowship political? And the answer is no, it is nonpartisan. And are fellows paid? And the answer is yes, absolutely, you do get paid. The pay level rate, if you want to look it up, is GS 14. Step 3. Okay, next slide. Here are the websites that I was referring to, and these are the online resources that are available to you 24/7. I highly recommend that you check out all of the information posted at whff.org. That is the website for the alumni group. And then when you're ready to apply, you will find even more information at the whitehouse.gov site. But use the .org site to get ready, to get prepared, to check out other profiles of previous alumni. There's also a Q&A section there that's pretty long. But yet, if you can't find an answer, I'm going to give you an email at the end of the program to write into us. Okay, next slide. So here's some examples of the type of things that you will find at our website. you're going to find a more in-depth explanation of what is the selection criteria and the process, the selection process itself. You will find out more information about eligibility requirements. You're going to see the outline of the different essay questions that you're going to be required to answer, and you'll receive some information on the different levels as you progress through the selection process, including the regional and national interviews. Next. Here are some Latino alumni that you may recognize, and you may have seen there when we were going through the video. Some of them were actually, you could see them when they were a White House fellow. So Cesar Conde, who of course is president, chairman, CEO, he's in charge of the whole enchilada at NBC Universal. And he was a White House fellow in 2002, 2003. Teresa Ledger Fernandez, congresswoman, newly elected from the state of New Mexico, was a White House fellow in 1995-96. And of course, many of you know the name Henry Cisneros, who served as a cabinet agency head for HUD, and he was a White House fellow in 1971-72. And Mari Carmen Aponte, who served as ambassador to El Salvador, and she was a White House fellow in 1979-1980. If you go to our website, you will find even a larger list of alumni that have gone before us. Next slide. Here's a picture of the current class who already started their service in September, and they too have assignments both in the White House as well as various cabinet agencies. Next slide. And by the way, at our website, if you want to know the bios of the current class, there's a link there where you can find out what their bios. Okay, so for those of you in the audience who can help us spread the word, we have some ready-made materials that we can send to you so that you can put it in your e-newsletters or your emails or your social media. We'd love to be able to share these snippets with you. So please let us know if we can be of service and if you can help us spread the word. And of course, we are grateful to CHCI for inviting us today to present before this audience. And if there's anyone else out there who would like to co-host a webinar with us, please contact us and let's see if we can work something out. Okay, next slide. Now we are going to the best part of the program. And David Iglesias, I would like to turn the program over to you. So I'm in Sacramento, California, and it's now going, David, where are you? I see Nelson. Hey, David, okay. So David Iglesias, who not only did he serve as a White House fellow, but today he leads our outreach efforts to the Hispanic and Latino community, and we are deeply grateful for that. Okay, David, over to you. And tell us first a little bit about yourself and where you are, et cetera.
You bet. So I think I'm only one of two Panamanians who became White House Fellows. There's a guy in Florida named Charles Garcia, who's the other. So we're a tiny subset of the bigger picture, but I was raised in New Mexico, in Albuquerque and in Santa Fe. And I actually know Teresa. She would have been my congresswoman had I still been there. But I'm living in Wheaton, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. I've been here teaching undergrads and running a political economy center. My past is pretty long, so I'll condense it as much as possible. I've served in the U.S. Navy. That's most of my career. I've also served as the United States Attorney for the District of New Mexico under the George W. Bush administration. I've also been a state prosecutor with the Attorney General's office in Santa Fe. I've defended police officers in civil rights lawsuits for the city of Albuquerque. I've run for political office. I've been in the private sector. Gosh, what am I forgetting? I'm probably forgetting a few other jobs. Oh, I've been general counsel for the taxation department. So lots of things going on in the past 30 years. But I first heard of the program as a young Navy JAG officer stationed in Washington, D.C. I looked at the application, I looked at the bios, and I said, no way. You know, I'm only 26, 27, there's just no way. So I forgot about it until a few years later, my boss, the city attorney of Albuquerque, called me in and asked me to apply. So I remembered the program. I applied, and I was extremely fortunate to go through all all the levels of selection, and I'm sure we'll get more into that, but it's a rigorous process. I spent several months and I did, this is no exaggeration, ladies and gentlemen, I think I did at least 50 drafts on my policy proposals and answering questions on like, why do I want to be a White House fellow? So I took that very, very seriously. And then there's lots of panels. We were probably interviewed by, I don't know, 15 or 20 different people. Very rigorous but very exhilarating. So it was a transformative year. I look back and it was the pivotal point. It was a turning point in my life. And I'm a big believer in what the Fellows Program does. And if anyone has any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to answer questions. Margarita, back to you.
Yes, David, thank you for that. Let me go next to Nelson Diaz, who actually was one of the people who reached out to me when it became known that I was a finalist as a White House Fellow. And Nelson, thank you. You also play a big role in reaching out to our Latino community, and I thank you for that as well. So Nelson, you're next.
Well, I was sort of out of character when I filed for the application for the White House Fellowship. I had known that Henry Cisneros had got elected, who was sort of the first Mexican-American in the program. And I had been involved heavily with the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund, and I was on the board and doing a lot of civil rights litigation. And I was upset that we had not had many Latinos in the first 10 years of the program. So I began to do an application process so that I could create a record for a lawsuit against the White House Fellows Program because of a few Latinos. That year, Jimmy Carter got elected, and Gardner, who was the founder of the program, was again the chairman of the commission. And I got selected, which was the bad news. And the good news for the program was that I didn't have to sue him. I then did a considerable amount of recruitment when I was there as a fellow. I've served also as the commission on the regional panels in Philadelphia for many years, and I served for 8 years on the commission of the president during the Obama period, and I had the fortune of selecting one of the people who you will hear from, Erica. It was the largest number of Latinos that were selected during that 8-year period, and we have not had many Latinos selected or participate or even apply. And this is why we're making this great effort, because let me tell you my benefit. I came out 3 years later, I was elected a judge. Cisneros came after me, we became very good friends. I was the general counsel at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I returned and became a partner in one of the major law firms in the country. And I still am practicing law, but in the process, I became a board member of a Fortune 100 company, Exelon, in Chicago, and I'm still on a corporate board. And I'm still working on issues to incorporate Latinos into other areas like corporate boards and other opportunities. So my advocacy continues. So I'm not the traditional fellow that came in. And I got to tell you that it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that I learned from then Vice President Mondale as his special assistant and traveling with him, which opened my life from just the parochial Philadelphia, New York, to a larger community throughout the country. It was such an important opportunity for me in terms of Latinos that we got the first Latino in the White House to work just on Latino issues, which was Congressman Esteban Torres, who was then ambassador to UNESCO. And we were able to work on bilingual education bill with a guy who then became a cabinet member, Federico Peña. And we have had such a wonderful relationship with all of these wonderful people throughout the country. So I think it expands you, it helps you, and it really brings you into a nuclear community that is in that presidential cabinet level that you otherwise wouldn't be able to understand. When I wrote my book, for example, and I talked about the White House Fellows Program, Vice President Mondale endorsed my book. So as you can see, those relationships continue pretty much to the rest of your life. And I think it's important for you in terms of Latino community, which is the largest minority community in the US who has not benefited from this program, to begin applying and looking for people who are qualified. And in my opinion, a lot of CCHI Institute graduates should be applying. I have hired many of them as I was the general counsel at HUD and throughout, and I know the background and I know the opportunity should be available to you. So take the opportunity, even if you don't think you can get in, apply, get a fellow around and we can help you with the application. And if I get back on the commission, you know you got an advocate.
All right. Thank you for your passion, obviously, Nelson, for the program. I want to welcome Carlos del Toro, who, in addition to being a White House Fellow, he also has the distinction of having served as president of our alumni organization. So Carlos, away to you. And Carlos is, don't forget to tell us where you're from, Carlos.
Thank you, Margarita. It's great to be here with all of you. And by the way, Nelson, Walter Mondale here recently did a great job. There's a CNN special, if you haven't seen it, on the vice president. It just came out, and he did an extraordinary job sort of describing his role as vice president to President James Carter, because it was actually Mondale, and well, it was Carter and Mondale who sort of recrafted the position of vice president in a very unique way to make it much more substantive than it ever had been before. So it's a great session. But I also want to add to what Nelson said and thank the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. It's an amazing organization. You know, the monies that you've raised has allowed great interns to come to Washington, D.C. every year and to participate in the many other programs that you have throughout the year, obviously make an impact on our policy across the United States in many different ways. So thank you for your own efforts in doing so. So I'm Cuban American. I came to this country as a refugee in 1961. I was only a year old. And at 17, I joined the Navy and served for 27 years, rising to the rank of commander, and I served as the first Hispanic to command one of our Arleigh Burke destroyers. But in 1998-99, I had the privilege, after reading Chapter 7 of Colin Powell's book, My American Journey, which is dedicated to the White House Fellows Program, and learning all about this program, I said, I've got to apply for that. And I applied actually in 93, 95 and didn't make it my first time. And I waited a few years and reapplied again when the opportunity presented itself. And it's been a magnificent journey ever since. I served as the White House Fellow at OMB, working for a gentleman by the name of Jack Lew. And the deputy director at OMB at the time was Sylvia Matthews Burwell. Both of them not only stayed throughout the entire Clinton administration, they actually had many positions of significant influence during the Obama administration. Jack Lew went on to be the president's chief of staff. Sylvia Matthews went on to be director of OMB herself, and then later on went to be the secretary of HHS. And today she's president of American University. And I've stayed in touch with all these folks, not to mention the many friends, the true friends that I have in the White House Fellowship Program. And it is really an amazing thing to be in touch with these amazing Americans who continue to make an impact on our lives in so many different ways. It's just an extraordinary adventure. And then in 2004, I retired from the Navy and transitioned out of the Navy and started my own private sector company. I own an engineering company. I've had it now for about 15 years. We're about 140 engineers strong and a very successful company working everything from satellite systems engineering to many health IT programs. And in 2017, I had the privilege of serving as the president of the Alumni Association. And the 1 year that you are president of the Alumni Association, Nelson had been a previous commissioner, full-time commissioner during the Obama administration. But the 1 year that you are president of the Alumni Association, you also get the privilege of serving on the President's Commission. So I had the opportunity to pick several White House fellows and to welcome them into the class as well, too. So it's an extraordinary program, and I highly encourage each and every one of you to apply and do your best and find yourself a mentor, like Nelson said, to help you throughout the process as well. Over to you, Margarita.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. And now we go to Erica in Los Angeles. Erica, hello, and thank you for being with us today. And as you'll notice, Erica is one of our younger alumni from our more recent class. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, the White House Fellowship was really transformative for me. I served at HUD and I served under Secretary Donovan and Secretary Julian Castro. There was a transition, so I had the opportunity to work under both leaders, so different approaches to management and different priorities. It was a really good experience. I would say the through line between my career experiences has really been access to opportunity. So it's been in community development, in housing, education, and really kind of working in low income, kind of high need, high resilience communities to really get the work done. And the White House Fellowship kind of propelled that work to a national level. Most of my work, I enjoyed being on the local level and being kind of an activist and agitator, but it was kind of time to think bigger and to think more nationally and how you do the work and how you're able to implement change on a broader level. So I think the White House Fellowship allowed me that experience and that opportunity and just really gave me access to really interesting, really smart people. My fellowship class was incredible. We were a small class, there were 12 of us, but we kind of ran the gamut. Very diverse. We had doctors, nanoscientists, lawyers, people in the financial industry. So just really smart, really committed people who wanted some experience in public service, but didn't really know kind of what the right entry point was and wasn't sure if government was for them. And so this was a great way to get exposure, to work with very smart, high-level cabinet officials or department agencies and really get to kind of serve our country in a different and unique way. So it was a very transformative experience for me.
Thank you, Erica. So I'm going to go back to David. You heard references to the different parts of the application process. David, could you spell out for us a little bit in more detail what those are?
Form, which asks you a series of essays. So you've got to respond, and these are pretty short essays, so typically 250 to 500 words. Probably the most important question, at least in my view, is why do you want to be a White House Fellow? You really need to have a good answer for that. Also, you need to come up with a policy proposal for the president. So it has to be something that the Constitution allows a president to do. I had a boss who made it to the final level, and she didn't get selected because she found out that the policy proposal she sent the president was outside of his authority. So she found out at the last minute and she was not selected. So you have to be very careful in the policy you pick. And then if your application you're reviewed by a panel of White House fellows in different geographical locations. And then my year we had something like 1,500 applicants. We went down to about 130, and then we were sent to regional. So different regional cities, we went and were interviewed by local luminaries. So the local anchor, maybe the governor's chief of staff, maybe a federal judge or a state judge. And they ask you a series of, frankly, difficult questions. Some are policy and some are personal questions. You'll have to do impromptu speeches. So if you are good on your feet, you'll love it. If you hate impromptu speeches, you're gonna have to practice because that's just part of being a White House Fellow. And then from about 130, it goes down to about 30 to 35, and that's you're sent to nationals. And there are larger panels and higher level people. So you'll get appellate judges, you'll get members of Congress, you'll get movie stars. So Mary Steenburgen, for instance, was a friend of the Clintons. So she was on my panel. Edwin Moses, the Olympic athlete, was a friend of the Clintons. So he was on the national panel. General Wes Clark, who became a 4-star, he was on the panel. Roger Porter, who teaches at Harvard but had been a cabinet secretary. So you get this wide range of professionals who ask some really penetrating questions. It's exhausting, but it's also exhilarating.
And if I can add to what you said, David, is that both Wes Clark and who else did you mention? Roger Porter, our former White House fellows as well. So this is Yeah. So, Carlos, is there anything that you would like to add to what David just said?
It's an extraordinary experience. It's very intense. It's a weekend you'll never forget. And part of the thrill of the experience too is meeting obviously the panelists themselves, all accomplished as David said, but also getting to meet all the other candidates that are there. Approximately 30 or so, 30 to 33 or so candidates are there, of which approximately half make it. But you know, you make friends with these individuals, and in fact, the first time I applied, I went to nationals with. I did make it to nationals the first time, and I made friends with a dear friend who just emailed me a few minutes ago, Peter Glusker, and Peter did not become a White House Fellow, and we became lifelong friends, probably closer than I am with many of my White House Fellow friends. So you know, that alone was worth the experience. And of course, you get to talk about, you know, I remember sitting at dinner or waiting for dinner, sitting next to Ted Sorensen, John F. Kennedy's speechwriter, and asking him, having a conversation, almost a half-hour conversation about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And here I am, you know, I was Cuban American, and you know, that's just an experience that you just rarely have. And that to me alone was worth the experience. So yeah, it's something you've got to take very seriously, obviously, and prepare for. The entire process takes an enormous amount of thought and reflection on the type of person that you are, what your belief system is, what is it that you're passionate about. And it's an exercise that's unquestionably, it's worthwhile.
Thank you, Carlos. Nelson.
The application process for me was an incredible experience because of the people that I met at the commission who became extremely helpful to me during the year that I served as a fellow. A guy by the name of Vicente Jimenez, who was the founder of the GI Forum and the first person of Latino descent to be an assistant secretary at the State Department. And he was a heavily well-known union leader. I met Ada Deer, and I had worked on Indian issues when I was in the vice president's office, because in 1978, there was the walk of the Native Americans to Washington. And as Mondale met them and my relationship with Ada Deer, it really helped me understand what the issues were. And when they said my great white father, I almost fell down. So I had to figure out with Ada, you know, what it is that they were really referring to, particularly being a civil rights advocate as I was. And as you can see today, we have a Native American for the first time who's going to be on the cabinet. So it's such a really wonderful experience for me to have known the community well, because I worked in the Native American issues, went to their areas, including in Panama. We went to the Indians off of Panama. And so the Native American issue was something that was strong in my life. But the other area that I didn't know anything about was veterans. And to have military people with you in the program begins to open a real appreciation for the relationship with the military and with the needs of American veterans when they come out. And that opens up another total door that sometimes you have no idea that you can essentially relate to and be an advocate for when you leave. So I would encourage you desperately, I say, to look for as many Latinos as possible to apply, and let us weed them out and let us help you as much as we can with your application process. Because as we know, with the growth of the Latino community in this country, if we don't learn the art of government and governance, it's going to be very difficult for us to really be a part of the process. And again, you don't have to be a government employee or government service or decide to stay in government. Most of us, like I did, return back to my community and return back to the private sector, as many fellows do. Some stay and some become great like Colin Powell, Secretary of State and so forth, but many of us return home and do service to the community and broaden our horizons. So that's the encouragement that I have for you.
Thank you, Nelson. And Erica, what would you like to add to the process of the different selection process, the levels?
Yeah, I would say use the application to your advantage, because this is the first glimpse they're going to get of you, right? That's the first screen. And so you have multiple questions. If you're, for example, my background is in education, but I didn't use every question to talk about education. I was able to highlight other experiences or other ways that I can contribute to the fellowship and to kind of be a well-rounded candidate. So I would urge you to kind of use the application process to your advantage. And then the same thing, I think I would echo the same sentiments. I didn't know anybody going into the process. I made friends with one of the candidates during regionals. And so him and we actually started mentoring each other. So we both ended up advancing to nationals, and we would kind of do mock interviews with each other and kind of like, okay, what about this? And do you think they're going to ask you this? And I would use that kind of the preparation, I would say, to become a little bit more well-rounded or just knowledgeable about the world around you. So my career was really focused on domestic politics, kind of education, community development, kind of crime. Like, you asked me anything about that, I could, we could talk, I could give you a dissertation on that, but really I didn't have a whole lot of foreign policy experience. So I did some homework. I started reading The Economist. I started, it was kind of, at the time I was applying, it was kind of EU, and was Turkey going to get in or not? And so just kind of being aware of real current events and being able to speak to them. You don't have to be an expert, but you should, have awareness and be aware of what's happening around you, and really just be thoughtful about that. And similar to what Carlos said, I just met some really great people during the process, especially when you get to nationals. You're going to meet, 35 great, interesting people that are doing really great work in their sectors, and they're really just kind of interesting to know. So I would use that opportunity to make, build relationships, make friendships. And it's just really a unique opportunity. I find in my, through self-selection, you kind of hang out with people that are doing the same things that you are, and you don't really necessarily have access to or exposure to other thought leaders or kind of other approaches to problems. So that is a really unique aspect of this, because you're kind of bringing people together from all walks of life to come and do public service and work in government. And so it was a really great opportunity.
Thank you, Erica. So one of the comments that we got in through LinkedIn on our webinars is one of our participants who previously applied to become a White House Fellow found the whole process to be mind broadening. And I think some of you have talked about that today, but if there's something specific that you want to add, will you please go ahead and do so now? And Erica, I'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think you kind of have to be prepared for what questions are going to come towards you. General Clark, when I walked into the interview, he's like, education, what's this? What do you know about foreign policy? And he just kind of started going at it, kind of, these are the kind of very Socratic method. And there were questions I honestly didn't know the answer to, and I was honest about that. I said, I'm not aware of that now, but I would learn. And he said, well, what if you're a Department of Defense? I said, well, I'd become an expert in the issue and I would learn. So I think just being aware, trying to be as informed as you can, but if you don't know an answer, don't make it up. You're talking to the expert. They're going to know that you don't know what you're talking about. So I would just say, be yourself, be authentic. If you don't know something, say it, but do your homework and be prepared for kind of questions that are going to come your way.
Carlos, what about you to that phrase, mind broadening?
Very, very much so. And, what Erica said earlier about ensuring that you sort of reflect all the components of your passion and your life and your interests in the application and in the interview process is very, very important. As a naval officer, for example, they weren't going to ask me questions about naval warfare. They pretty much assumed I by then had known what I needed to know about naval warfare. But they were going to ask me, questions about foreign policy and even more important than that, domestic policy, right? So, in preparing for the fellowship, one of the things that I did was I sort of divided everything that one could possibly learn about the entire universe into foreign policy and domestic policy. And you start sort of bearing down on it. Okay, well, what is it that I know about China? What is it that I know about Pakistan? What is it that I know about, what is it I know about the price of strawberries in California, right? And you sort of spend months, sometimes weeks, thinking about these things and trying to, come to a perspective that's important. But throughout all of that, something that's very important, not just in applying to the fellowship, but I would argue that in life itself, is to be very objective in your analysis, right? For one thing, this is a nonpartisan program. So it's not about Democrat versus Republican versus independent. It's about how well do you think about things? Lawyers in particular are trained throughout their law profession to think this way, very objectively. Here are the pros to this, but you pick gun control, for example, right? What are the pros to gun control? What are the cons to gun control? And you quote the Constitution and people's individual rights, and then you talk about public safety and how it's critically important. And then you come to a conclusion that the answer, as it usually does in life, lies somewhere in the middle, right? And you try not to be too ideological about it, right? It's okay to express passion, but as we've as we've discovered sometimes recently, ideological arguments sometimes don't pan out very well. So objectivity is very important in how you view these things. And you learn along the way. I mean, just by the process of preparing for this, you really learn a lot of things about a lot of different topics.
Thank you, Carlos. David, would you like to add something?
Yes, thank you. Could you reframe the question, Margarita?
Oh,
I was
good.
answering
Okay.
a ton of questions.
So we were talking about the application process, and one of our participants had written in a observation that he found the application process mind broadening. And so we were looking for examples of, even if you don't get selected, what are some of the benefits of applying to become a White House Fellow?
Well, I think it really helps. I think if you're a reflective person, you'll really enjoy answering these questions, because they really, like Carlos said, it's not going to ask you questions about the price of strawberries in California, but he's going to try to make you analyze yourself and know thyself, like the Greek philosopher said. The word that comes to my mind was exhilarating. I felt like my mind was expanded and challenged in a way that it had rarely been challenged. And I still feel that way after 25 years. So I think it's a good exercise in general. People like to complain about, we live in a shallow culture and whatnot. Well, you want to get in the deep waters, apply and start turning some of those answers inward. It's a great experience. It's a great exercise.
Thank you, David. And Nelson?
Erica is pretty right that Wesley asked questions that had absolutely no relevance in life or in the universe. And so it used to take off the poor fellows. And I was the one that was trying to help them. And so I was the nice guy. And it was so horrible to see the fellows go through that excruciating process of, why is the moon in the circumference of where they are? And I'm telling you, it had no relevance. All he wanted to do was see how you could think. There was no answers to any of the questions that he was making. And so Wesley, most of us couldn't fit into that category and would be awed by a lot of his questions. But there was some of us who were helpful. We had the president of Brown University was in the program when Erica went through the process, and she was most adoring and really looking to see how we can bring in underserviced communities that hadn't participated. She was African American as a Brown University, and so we tried as much as we can to bring some diversity to the process, which has not been the tradition in the history of the White House Fellows. And so diversity is extremely important today. And the reason we're doing some of this outreach is because we want to have people not only from the Washington, D.C. scene or from the traditional privileged class get in, but we want to see others throughout the country, whether it's the West, whether it's the Midwest or the South, to come in, including African Americans and so forth. So we are very, very committed to the program. It's been an incredible experience for all of us, and we want you to experience the same thing we have so that we can join with you. The process is an exercise of thinking and whether or not you have some commonality and whether or not you can work together with other people. Since you have a class that you're going to be meeting with people who are eminent and former cabinet members and former, on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, issues that you totally disagree, and whether or not you're going to act politely and whether or not you're going to act. I had the opportunity to go to Nixon's house in California after he had been in, sort of left. And the question was, how were we going to act with Nixon? And the respect that we needed to employ in terms of giving us an audience, an opportunity to get an inside look at him and what the issues there were that he went through. So that's an incredible experience. You could not pay for it. You could not afford to pay for all of the experience you get. I was a GS-15, by the way, which is the highest level of government pay when I was a fellow. So I got to tell you that it is very, it is not a financially tough program outside of the fact that you have to move into Washington, D.C. And so remember that you won't have much financial sacrifice, but you will have you will have a year sacrifice of leaving your permanent employ and deciding what you're going to do after you finish the program, which is usually a better opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Nelson. And just to clarify one point, I believe that the current pay level is GS-14 Step 3. Carlos, do you know anything different from that?
Yeah, I heard you on the 14.3, that is. But what happens is they do a qualification process based on the prior income that you had. And based on that prior income, then they decide which level you're going to get paid at.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for that insight. Okay, let me take you back in time. Because one question that we get asked a lot is this the right time for me to apply? And the answer obviously is going to be different for everyone, but was there something how did you personally know that it was the right time to apply? And what did you do then to apply, to get ready? And Carlos, let me go ahead and start with you.
Well, the first time I applied obviously wasn't the right time. But I was proud that I did make it to finals. And, every person has their own personal circumstances. I had 4 children at the time. God bless my wife. And, I was in the Navy and I was still fairly young in my career. And, I was very tactically focused. But I departed for finals with about 103 fever. And my oldest child got me sick because I flew back from an operation. I was at home for about 3 or 4 days. He was sick. He got me sick. And off I went to finals. But that's life, And so it was kind of hard to impress people while you were sweating on the table in front of them. But nevertheless, God has its path, right? But yeah, I mean, you're the best judge, obviously, of what's the right timing. And it's important to sort of reflect on whether you consider yourself well prepared to do this. There was a question in the Q&A that I was glancing at just a little bit earlier that it almost, the person asking the question basically said, it sounds like you have to sort of walk on water to apply. And my response to that is actually, no, you don't. What's important, however, is that you be passionate about the things that you have done and be able to articulate that very effectively to others, right? One thing we haven't talked about, for example, is community service. Community service is extremely important. This is a leadership program. It's not the Rhodes Scholars. We're not evaluating how intellectually competent you are, although you do have to be intellectually competent to survive. But it's about leadership, and leadership is demonstrated in many different ways. And so there are many ways in which you can impress the panelists and the White House Fellows with what you've done in life. It needs to be things that are substantive, right? So whatever it is that you've dedicated yourself to in life, whether it's children or health or housing or whatever the topic may be, a demonstrable pattern of substantive community dedication is what we seek in a White House Fellows candidate.
Thank you, Carlos. David, same question to you.
You're on mute, David.
I'm sorry, Margarita, I've answered 26 questions, so can you please repeat?
Yes, okay, so I want to take you back in time. When you decided to apply, how did you know it was the right time for you? And then what did you do to get ready?
Yeah, so I had done my homework, and I knew that the sweet spot was somewhere in the 30s. Yes, there were some in their 20s. I think the youngest ever was Henry Cisneros at 23 or something, but that's a one-off. And the oldest tend to be around 40. So I was 36, so I knew I was right there. So I figured this is the right time. Plus my boss wanted me to apply. I mean, how often does that happen, what I did to prepare was I talked to former fellows. I picked up the phone and I literally called the current fellows that had something in common with me. So I think I called 2. And then there were a couple in my hometown of Albuquerque. I had lunch with them. And so I had a pretty good idea of what the program was about. So it was the perfect time for me.
Great, great. Nelson, what about you?
I think the perfect time to apply is now, because the opportunities are greater for diversity now than some other administrations. And so for me, I would encourage you to look and to talk to other fellows, have other fellows give you some advice on the process and give you some assistance in the application. And then they'll tell you whether the time is fluid now or not. But I think you have to look at the opportunities now. You have to seize them when they're available. That's what happened to me. I was looking to open doors, and instead I walked into the doors before you could bring in others. And so that there are people within the commission who see something in you sometimes that you don't see in yourself. And that brings the opportunity to bear in terms of your future opportunities. Most people want you to do it at mid-career level after you sort of have accomplished some things. I was involved in economic development. I had revitalized a community area in North Philadelphia, which is a very poor area in the city and in the country. And I brought it to bear, and I had defended some people who had been found guilty of criminal offenses like murder, that I was able to get out of jail. So I had a career early on that had a very vocal. Despite that, there were some on the commission that thought I was too ethnic. And so, because I had done a lot of it within the Latino community, and what I would say to them is, well, if you're only doing it in one community, whether it's the Jewish community, the white community, whatever, is that considered too on the other side? And so you have to really defend your public activities and understand how that occurs when you're going through this process. But it's really important. I can't emphasize it. It's really important that we find as many people who are qualified during this period of time when there are important opportunities for diversity.
Erica.
For me, I actually didn't know if it was the right time. A boss at the time, former mentor, he was served as a White House fellow during the George W. Bush era, and he kind of pulled me aside and he said, "I think you're a perfect candidate for this program, and I want you to apply." And I knew about the program, but I didn't think the program was for me. And so when the application came out, he actually forwarded it to me. He said, "You're applying." Up to that point in my career, I didn't really have somebody that had taken that level of interest in my career to say like, "No, this is for you, you're going to do it." So I almost applied out of spite. I put my best foot forward, but I'm like, I'm just going to do this so he'll kind of get off my back and he'll leave me alone. And I even remember at the time it was a requirement your current employer had to give you a letter of recommendation. So I walk in to go talk to the CEO, who was my boss, and I said, "I'm going to apply for this program. I don't think I'm going to get it, but I need to put myself out there. It's a great opportunity." And he's kind of like, "Okay, and as I started going through the process, when I made it to nationals, they said, "Oh, I actually made it to nationals." And he says, "I know as soon as they meet you, they're going to want you, but it was other people who kind of pushed me along. And so if you're not sure, like, take the risk, take the chance, believe kind of in your experience and put your best foot forward. And I think it's a good opportunity because I thought I wasn't ready, but clearly other people saw something in me that I wasn't seeing for myself at the time.
Thank you. So our time is actually up, but David, I'm going to ask you to come in and please summarize you said you were answering a lot of questions. Can you give us an overview of the type of questions that were being asked?
So 32 questions, and then I think Carlos answered a couple on top of that. So a lot had to do with, qualifications. When should I do it? I'm right out of college, or I'm this age. I'm that age. Some had to do with the policy proposal. Do I need to come up with a completely novel policy proposal, or can it be something that's already been ruled on or issued by the president? One that I've never heard before was, does the fellow's office provide housing for people who have come in from, territories like, the U.S. Virgin Islands and whatnot? I think the answer is no. I think where you come from, you have to find housing, whether it's continental U.S. or overseas U.S. But I got to tell you, I apologize for being a little distracted, but this audience was really engaged. I mean, you guys asked a lot of really good questions, and I was struggling to keep up. In fact, there's one in the queue right now, which I want to answer prior to this being over. But this is, of the two we've done, this group is the most engaged and involved audience that I've seen.
Do you want to toss out that question? And maybe there's others that want to comment on questions they've seen.
So this is kind of a humorous question. I want to respectfully disagree that you folks walk on water. I've read the bios, LOL. Well, I can tell you, Carlos del Toro does not walk on water. He drives ships on waters.
All right, how about the rest of you? Did you see any questions come in that we should address to the whole audience here?
Well, the age issue is always raised, and age is not a determinative. As he said, as David said, some in my class, it was from the age of 29, who was a medical doctor, till the age of 46, who was a military officer. Joe Anderson was the oldest in my class, and so that it ranges, and it's good that it ranges because the more experience that somebody has, that can also fortifies some of the fellows who are younger in the class. So it's a really educational experience, not only with regard to what you get from the program, but also what you get from your other members of the class, and who become your friends forever, by the way.
And Nelson, how old were you when you were selected? How old were you when you found out about the program?
I found out on my 30th birthday.
So
I was on the same day at 30, May 23, 1977. Right on my birthday, I get the notice, and I'm saying, "Oh God, I can't sue you."
Well, wait. No, my question was, how old were you when you found out about the program? And how old were you when you got selected? When you got selected?
Well, I had seen brochures in law school, but I really didn't become interested in it until Cisneros went through the program, because he was bigger than life even then becoming mayor and so forth. So I think that's why it's so important that you have people, as you mentioned in our brochure, that you can see are very common. None of them walk on water. I tell everybody, if I got in, anybody can get in. And so you have to realize that you gotta be in the lottery to win. So, get in the lottery, and that's the problem. Everybody says, I never win, but you never buy a ticket. Well, if you don't put forth your name, and if you don't try, you're never gonna get in. So please try, because it doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time to go through your whole life history. And once you've gone through your life history, and even if you don't get in, you'll realize, wow, there are things that I need to do in my life to correct what I've been doing.
Very good. Thank you, Nelson. Carlos,
Margarita,
what about you? Yes.
Was that no, I'll wait. I was going to respond to one of the questions in the chat, but I can wait till Carlos.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Margarita. What was the specific question?
The range of age in your class. And
okay.
When you found out, and how old when you found out, and when you actually became a fellow.
Yeah, well, I was 35 when I applied the first time, and then I was 38 when I applied the second time. So the youngest person in my class was 28 years old. I was the second oldest in my class.
Okay.
I think the oldest fellow that I'm aware of was 42 when they were a White House fellow.
All right, thank you. Erica.
I will not be responding to the age question, but I wanted to respond to the question about, there was a question in the chat about family. And if what's the experience like for your spouse or for your children? And I didn't have either of those at the time of my fellowship, but I will say that my class made a real effort to include the spouses and children. So when we had community service opportunities, we tried to select things that were family friendly. When we were going to hang out, socially, we tried to make sure to incorporate the spouses and the children, because, you are working, and we know it's a lot of time. The fellowship it's a job, so it takes up a lot of your time. So we did make an effort. The spouses actually ended up doing like happy hours or brunches on themselves. They're like, we don't want to hang out with you guys. We're going to hang out with each other. But we really made an effort to kind of incorporate them because it's important, and it's kind of your support structure, and you want everyone to feel included. And so I know our class made a real effort to make sure that we could incorporate, spouses and children whenever we could.
Thank you, Erica. So we all realize we're in overtime now, and thank you for hanging in there with us. David, there was another question that I remember came in, I think via email or LinkedIn, I can't remember now, about whether or not if you are a political appointee or going to be one, if you could still be a White House fellow.
Well, the one that I saw was there's a management fellowship program. Can they apply to both? And I think the answer is you can apply to both, but you can't serve both. You'll have to pick one or the other. I don't think the program allows for co-fellowship. Plus, that you're going to be so busy with your White House Fellows duty, you're just not going to have time to do anything else. But the question that I just saw that maybe somebody knows the answer to is this. If you'll be completing an internship in May of 2021 with a federal agency, knowing that you won't be an active federal civilian employee or intern when the next program starts, would you be eligible to apply? I think the answer is yes, but I'm wondering if any of you know the answer to that question.
Carlos.
I'm sorry, I was momentarily distracted by a question.
No, I mean, so the writer is currently an intern, but the internship is going to end. It's with a federal civilian agency. It's going to end in May. Can they apply to begin on September 1st?
as long as you're not a government employee when you come to serve as a White House fellow, well, you can't be a government employee when you apply either. You have to be a civilian. So you can't serve in the government when you apply.
What if in the interim, and I think this was the question that came in, you become an appointee before September?
Yeah, you cannot be an appointee. I mean, if you've entered the job, if you've accepted the appointment, you cannot serve as a White House fellow.
It's an apolitical program. Apolitical meaning no politics. And if you enter the government as an appointee, you're a political appointee.
If you applied for an appointment but you haven't received it, then you're still a civilian, and you could apply. So for people who are currently applying to Build Back Better, join us under the Biden administration, you can apply for a job. You can apply for the White House Fellowship, but you're going to have to make a decision along the way. It's likely that you will get, if you do get a job, it's likely that you'll get a job in the administration before the fellowship selection process is over in June. And if you do get a position with the Biden administration, for example, you're going to have to make the decision whether to accept it and then not be able to continue with the White House Fellowship. If you don't get offered a job by the Biden administration, you're okay.
Thank you, Carlos. David, any last questions that you want us to review?
I've got 3 more that I'm answering. Let me take a look here.
And by the way, thank you so much for taking the lead on that. I know it's hard to both answer questions and be part of a
Yeah, I'm not a very good multitasker, but let's see here.
And any of you, if you see any questions on the chat that you want us to answer, please feel free to jump in.
I understand you cannot have another job while you're a fellow. Can you be on leave with no pay from your job so that you can return to it after your fellow's year? Carlos, yes, right?
Yes, you could take a leave of absence from your company, and in the business sector, sometimes that happens. So you can take a leave of absence. That's a commitment to go back that you make, but and then you can serve. Yes.
But you cannot identify yourself as part of that company because you're part of the government and you have some allegiances to the government, including some, depending where you're assigned, some Secret Service. What do they call that when you get?
You're going to be required to certify for security clearance at the top secret level. And therefore, you'll be asked all sorts of questions, but there cannot be any conflicts of interest.
Correct.
Here's a question, a practical question that Margarita probably knows. Will this be posted somewhere? This person missed the first hour and would like to.
Yes, absolutely. If you registered for this webinar, you will be receiving a recording and also a follow-up survey. And I wanted to say one thing about the leave of absence, because in fact, when I applied to become a White House Fellow, I was already on a leave of absence to serve as the head of a nonprofit. And that was actually one of the things that deterred me initially, is the fact that I was on a leave of absence. Would my company welcome getting yet another leave of absence now to become a White House Fellow? And initially I wasn't going to apply, and eventually I did. And just as I predicted, my boss was not pleased, or he wasn't ecstatic, that I was asking potentially for another leave of absence. But at the end of the day, when I was at finals, the CEO of my company called me to say, hey, we're 100% behind you. So it's different in everyone's case. The letters of recommendation might come from your supervisor, or they may not. My recommendation is you try to get a breadth of letters of recommendations, again, to show the wholeness of your person. And if anyone wants to add something, please do so now, because we're going to be wrapping up soon.
There's a quick question on an internship funded by Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute does not qualify as government service. So you're not under the employment of the government. You're just serving as a CHCI intern in the Senate.
And they do a great job of recruitment. That's one of the reasons we are trying to reach out to you, because there are so many great CHCI alumni that are doing incredible things. I hired one that is in a top position at AT&T, for example, and I can go on, but there is so many good individuals who have done major accomplishments within the CHCI process. And I just would hope that you take this information that we've given you and spread it to as many people within your alumni group, so that they can also have the opportunity to apply.
And I think the other question that remains is the question about undergraduate and undergoing a master's program. So it's not generically set up for recently graduated undergraduates. If you're related to Albert Einstein, however, there's probably an exception there somewhere. Like I said, most people are in their 30s basically when they apply. But that doesn't necessarily mean. I have a classmate from the Naval Academy who was, a Rhodes Scholar. He graduated from the academy. He went to Rhodes Scholarship, and he was, I think, 23 when he was accepted into the White House Fellows Program, 23 or 24. So
in my class, we had someone who was working on her doctorate, and so she became a fellow, and she continued the thesis. It was part of the process. And fortunately, she got enough information and learned a hell of a lot so that her thesis was totally oriented based upon the position that she finally accepted or in the White House Fellows Program. So it varies all along. There was, in one of the classes we selected, there was a person who had been a reporter with the Washington Post and had just graduated from law school. But he had incredible background and history in his activities in the Middle East with regard to coverage in the Washington Post. He came into the class, he was accepted, he was graduate out of law school, and he stayed on, worked at the State Department and became the assistant to the Secretary of State, and on. So that he was very young, but he had major accomplishments at that age.
So Margarita, I've got one more question, actually two, and then I'll need to sign off because I've got finals to grade. So I apologize.
Give them all A's.
No. Yeah, I don't do that. So here's an interesting question. This question is clarifying employment by the government. The questioner is currently a fellow in the Senate, but not funded by Congress, funded by CHCI. Are they a federal employee for purposes of the fellowship?
No.
Okay, so they can apply, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the final question before I sign off is the level of security clearances. Is it secret or top secret? I can't remember.
Well, it depends on your assignment.
Oh, okay.
If you're in the White House, you've got higher clearances. You're in the State Department, you have higher clearances. So it depends on the assignment you get. If you're working for the CIA, you got incredible clearances. So it depends the assignment that you decide to go to, or the assignment the person selects you to. But generally, it is top clearance.
Which means an FBI background check, and they will be checking with all your references, and then the references of your references, and it can go as far as it goes. But be prepared for that. If you do make it to the finals, I believe is when they start doing that. If you become a finals candidate is when they start that process. Okay, David, any other questions that we want to tackle?
No, I think we're good.
Well, let me tell you, the application, if you're not selected, or even if you are selected, the applications are not kept. they are totally discarded after the process. So I know that because of my freedom of information request. So they're totally discarded. So you don't have to worry. If you apply one time and you're going to apply again, if there's a different commission, they won't know anything about the first time that you apply and the information you supply. So you should be aware of that. They're all discarded.
You know, I did want to add one last insight that was shared by Commissioner Victor Arias on our last webinar. And some of you may recall that he said, when asked, okay, as a commissioner, what is it that you're looking for? And do you remember, you've heard the discussion here about, you know, the wide range of knowledge, because in essence, you can be asked anything. It can be personal or related to foreign affairs or domestic affairs. But he said, I look not so much at what they said, but how they said it, which goes back to what David Iglesias said earlier in the program about being able to think quick, you know, on your feet and come up with an answer that's knowledgeable, but yet well-informed. So I leave you with that, unless there's someone else. And any last thoughts from our panel? I'll just go down the line. Erica, any last tips or thoughts?
No, just apply. Take a chance on yourself and apply.
Carlos.
Just remember what Nelson said. If he made it, anybody can make it.
All right. David.
Just do it now or in the next few years. We need more qualified Latinos in the program.
And Nelson.
And if you don't want to apply and you've heard and it's interesting, you know, seek some other people who might be interested, and we'd be happy to talk to them. So please, let's populate the entire Latino community. This is the best secret kept in the government, this program. It is the best secret. I got to tell you, if it wasn't for this program, I would not have achieved all of the things that I then achieved afterwards, because once you work here, everybody thinks you've gotten smarter.
All right. So, you know, there is, okay, there's one last pop-up survey. Please answer it for us. We want to know how you got here today. And Jen, do you mind putting up the last slide? If we did not answer your questions today, or you have other questions that come up and they are not answered on our website, I want you to go to our website first. If you cannot find the answer, then please write to us at recruit@whff.org. You can also use that email if you want to recommend someone that you think should be applying to the program, so we can reach out to them. Please use that email address after you've exhausted all of your other resources online. We thank you again, you know, for being here today. I want to thank the panel, bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And so we're signing off now. Reminder, if you didn't get to see the whole thing, you will be sent, all registrants are being sent both the recording and a follow-up survey. Thank you. And thank you, Jen, our Wizard of Oz behind the scenes, for making this all happen. And again, to Marco Davis and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for being the catalyst in today's webinar. Hasta luego. Bye.